Hello guys, welcome to another video. In this particular video, we're going to be talking about integrating M-Pesa STK Push using a payment um, aggregator or wrapper who is IntaSend. IntaSend is basically a wrapper of different payment options. For example, they wrap the M-Pesa Daraja, they wrap Pesa Ring, that is for banks, and they also wrap cards like Mastercard and so on and so on. But I think they have they are waiting on is it called accreditation for approval from the CBK so that they can now work with the likes of Mastercard. But for now, you're going to be trying out InstaSend. There are of course different other aggregators that we're going to be talking about where later in I'm going to make tutorials for them, but for now you're going to be using IntaSend. IntaSend does the same thing that PesaPal does, and also there's other options like PayHero, there's PayStack, there's Flutterwave, all those different options, but IntaSend works the same way. So so you're going to be looking at their documentation. You can access it by developers .instasend.com. I'm going to be sharing that. And to get started, you can download this zip file. I'm going to also attach it in the YouTube description below there. Once you download it, you can come there and unzip it or extract it. I'm just going to extract it there. And once you've extracted it, you can open it with VS Code. So this is our folder, and that's where you're going to be accessing it from. The next thing that you're going to do from here is navigate to the terminal and install all the necessary. It's a folder within a folder. That's not what I wanted, but we're just going to navigate it that way. Well, maybe let me just move it to the parent folder. Let me move what is inside here. I have this. Then I'm going to move it to the parent folder. If that's not an option, you definitely can. Yeah. And then I'm going to delete the previous parent. So now when I do rs, they're going to be in the same folder. So the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to take you through what we have here. And before I take you through, I'm just going to install the node packages. So I'm going to run npm install. Then that's going to install all the packages that we have here. It's going to install Axios, it's going to install bodyparser, .env, EJS, which is the templating that you're using, Express. Grok is not important in this case. I'll probably uninstall that package. And then NodeMon for that's what we're going to, the package we're going to be using to run our server and then pass the URL. So in the meantime, as it installs all those dependencies, let me take you through what we have. So I have three options here. First of all, I have the public folder. The public folder has a few images. Some of them you're using, some of them you're not using. And then the JS has the index.js. I'll come explain this in a few. And then we have the styles, which are basically just basic styles. And then we have views. This is probably where I should start explaining. There are two ways to integrate using IntaSend documentation. There are ways you can integrate first using from the documentation by using the payment button element. What this does, they have created a web SDK, a web client SDK. What this does, you just create a button that has this class and these attributes, data amount and data currency. And once you add this button, when someone clicks it, the web SDK is initiated via script, and then the script makes this window instance available and loads the payment gateway using that web SDK. I'm going to show that in a few, and then you can navigate through their events. They have on complete event, they have a failed event and in progress event. So that is one option by adding this payment button. The other option is, which kind of gives you more control to control everything, is the M-Pesa STK Push option, where you install. This is all going to run on NodeJS, so I'm not going to do any Python or PHP. So you're going to install this particular package or dependency, or it's basically an SDK. Once you install this SDK, it's going to make an InstaSend class available, and from that class, you can call the method correction, which has a correction of all other methods that you can directly access and play around with or integrate with your system. And the method that we're going to be targeting in particular this tutorial is the M-Pesa STK Push method within the InstaSend correction. So basically, that's what we're going to be doing. And let me check whether my modules have now been installed. So yeah, and then I'm just going to run from here, nodemon server.js. So this is going to run our server. Our server is running on port 8080. So I'm just going to come to my browser and navigate to port 8080, and then I'm just going to reload these pages, these two pages. So let me take you through what we have in our server file. So in our server file, first of all, we're importing Express, and then all the dependencies. That's what we're importing here. Let me show you. So we are just, first of all, importing all the modules here. You can see them here. And then the next thing that we are doing is that we are loading .env, which is the dependency for environment variables, and then the app, which is now Express framework, and then the port. That's what we are doing here. And then from there, we are getting the file name and then using that file name to get the directory name. And that is going to get the directory name of this server.js. So basically, the directory name here now is going to be IntaSend. And then from there, this directory name is what we are passing to path and then joining it with the public, but renaming the public now, the public folder, to static. So all our images are going to be accessible via the static. So this is pretty basic. I'm sure you know how that works, and that's why we are going to have static here. Yeah. So if we didn't like join it, we would be having public. So that is another option. And then the other thing that we are doing is that we are using the body parser dependency at the package. And what this body parser is doing to us is sort of decoding the data that you're going to receive from the forms that we have in our that we are going to be receiving when we are submitting payments. And then from there, we are using the view engine, which is EJS, and that's basically it. And then we are just telling that the views should be available through the views folder, and that's where the templating engine should look for the views files. So that's basically it, and that's what we're basically doing. So from there, I've created two routes. One is direct, which is what we're going to be using with the web SDK. This is the route that is going to cover our web SDK. Let me show you that in a minute. So if we go back to our browser, this button is what is going to be, this route is what is going to be covering our web SDK, and this option is the direct one, is going to be covering the STK push, which is what gives us more control. So that's what we're going to be doing. So that route covers the web. This route covers the web or the client web SDK, and this one covers the server-side SDK. And then we have the payment route for submission. This payment route is coming from from the direct SDK, which is what we're going to be using on our client. You can access it via the payment. In our payments, that's where we are going to be, that's why we have this form, the form that calls this particular route, and that route is what we are targeting here. Yeah, so that the data that is going to be submitted via that form, that is the amount, and the phone number is what we're now going to process and trigger with it. The button is calling the button.ejs, and from this button.ejs file, that is what is constructing this, a basic product page. And you can see that I've already added the button, but I'm going to show you that in a while. So that is basically how the entire thing is running. And then we have the payment and failure, which is all the custom pages that are going to be shown in case there is fail and in case there is success. And then we have helpers.ejs, which is just a basic validation or data cleaning functions. For example, the normalize, what it's doing is that it's taking the number formatting and then constructing it and adding the 254, which is the format that InstaSend requires. And then we have the validation, which probably shouldn't be here. It should be on the front end. But yeah, that's it. You can improve it further. So the next few minutes, I'm going to be starting on the web or the client web SDK. Now, let's continue with the first section. So there are two ways you can integrate an STK push on your website. One of the option is using the client web SDK, and the other option is using the STK push from the Node package or the SDK that they create for server side. So in this particular section, I'm just going to be covering the web client. So again, we move to the documentation. So if you move to the documentation, you'll see there is an option called payment button. I'm going to just start from here, but you can read on getting started. For example, there is authentication that you're going to see that you can get a public key and a secret key. You can navigate to the sandbox environment and the Rive environment, where you just create an account and then generate your keys. And you can do the same for the live environment. I've already generated my keys, but go ahead and navigate to InstaSend account and InstaSend portal, sandbox portal, or the Rive portal, and create an account. I've already created mine, but once you create an account, you can navigate and generate your keys. I'm not going to be covering that because it's pretty easy to how to do that. You can see this process. It's pretty easy. Once you log in, you just copy the public key and then you can generate the secret token. So that's how the authentication kinda happens. That's basically it. And you can see that the to authenticate using a secret key, you just add bearer and then. But because you're using the SDK, we are not using any REST API or anything. This is pretty going to be easy. You don't have to do all this. You can see the libraries. They have a few libraries. For NodeJS, they have this package called InstaSend IntaSend Node, and this is how you interact with it. You pass the secret and then the public and then the environment, whether it's environment or production. like whether it's development environment or whether it's production. Now, moving to accepting payments, you can click on payment button. And then from here, you can see that you can add a payment button by just adding this button here and then ensuring that it has cross IntaSend Pay button, and then adding your attributes there. And then once someone clicks on this button, it's going to load this particular web plugin or web SDK, and it's going to now like help them interact with your with payment. So you're going to do that. From your files, you can navigate to button, and the button file is button.ejs inside views. And then inside here, you will see that we have the web page, and then you have this particular button. Let me zoom that for you. You have this particular button. So this particular button, you can access it by now this is the button that we have to edit. You can see that I've already added the class, so there isn't like much you have to do. So but yeah, so once you ensure that IntaSend button, which is what we have here. So if I hadn't added the class, you just come here and copy the class like that, and once you copy it, you just come and paste it here. And then you are going to add the attributes for data amount. So why are we adding this? You can see that from the documentation, there is the web SDK is going to get the information to display on your page from these attributes. Yeah, you have to add those attributes starting with data in that format, and then the field. So for currency, it's data dash field dash currency, and then data dash amount, which is what we have done here. Once you've added the amount, this is the amount that is now going to be deducted from the customer. If you wanted this to be a little bit dynamic with EJS, you can add some script here, and then the amount that is set here is what is going to be pre-populated here. Or if you have an API that is fetching products from the backend, it displays them here. You can add it. You can add that dynamically, but that is not the focus we are doing in this particular video. So I've already added the data amount and the data currency. That's it. And then what we're going to do, we are going to navigate to our JS file, which is what we have here. In this particular file, you can see that we have this particular route, which is targeting the path name direct. You're just going to cross that because that is what we're going to cover now in the next stage. And then you're going to also cross this one and cross this one. And then here, we're going to handle when someone loads that particular route. So just first of all, going to ensure that they're on that particular route. And then what we're going to write here is window.location shows this particular path name. So what we're going to do, the path route should be button. If that route is loaded, the first thing you're going to do is just console log just to be sure it's working okay. And then from here, the next thing that we're going to do, what we want to do is to ensure that the web current SDK or the script is loaded. What you're going to do is just get this class. You're just going to copy it. There's no harm in copying. Then paste it there. And then what we're going to do is replace this key with the key that you generated from now the InstaSend account that you created. Just going to leave it open. I already have it in my environment variable. So just to make sure that you copy it and paste it there. And then the live, whether it's are you live? So I'm going to use my live key. So I'm going to change this to true. If you are using the sandbox detail, make sure that you change this to false so that for it to work. Otherwise, the keys are not going to be. The key is going to be okay, but probably if it's a live key and then here you've set false, they're not going to match because it's not the same environment. And then what you're going to do is in this particular section, now here is where you can now handle what you want after payment is complete. Yeah. If, for example, payment is complete, what do you want? What do you want to do? For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to be doing anything to payment. I'm just going to be logging it. So I'm just going to be changing this to payment was a success. And then on failed, you can change it to what you want. For example, on complete, once a member complete, you may want that product to be submitted to the database, to the successfully bought, or the product that particular user has bought. You maybe want it to be you probably want it to be submitted to the database. On fail, if you want it to also be recorded among the failed um, um, products, so that maybe you can follow on. There's basically a ton of things that you can do, but we're not going to be doing that in this particular video. I'm just going to be logging it. So there isn't much I'm going to do. And in progress event, this happens when the transaction is still in progress. They haven't entered their PIN, they haven't cancelled, in progress. So we're just going to be logging that out. So yeah, and then let me add my key, and then we can test it out. So I've already added my key. There's no harm in displaying your public key. That is what I want you to understand. For example, this is my live public key. There's no harm in displaying the public key, because after all, it's going to be publicly available. For example, you can check that from the key is going to be publicly available from, for example, if you go to authentication, you can see that the public key is supposed to be learned on client side. There is no harm in displaying it. So I'm not adding it. I'm not pausing the video to add it because it's bad. I'm just pausing because of the live key which I have in my environment variable. So yeah. So once you've added it, you can navigate to the page, which is this one, and reload it, because it's client-side JS. You have to ensure that it's loaded, and then you can check whether the button has been loaded, whether the script is, yeah. You can see that the script is loaded right, and then you can click on buy. So this one is going to load the script, and then this is what you're going to have. This is what your customers are going to have. M-Pesa link is for banks. They can check out via banks, and M-Pesa is the other option. So you can just enter the phone number here. For example, I'm going to enter my phone number, and then click on pay. I'm just, because I have console logged the event, I'm just going to console log. Now, I've received the STK push. What I want you to understand is that I've tried a few events, and I've seen that some of the events are not working okay. For example, on fail. So in this particular video, I'm just going to enter my PIN to so I've just entered my PIN. It seems like I was right on entering the PIN. So I'm just going to retry. But you can see it's kind of handling the entire UI. You don't have to redo it on yourself like we're going to do in the other section. So I'm just going to retry it again. And this time I hope I'm going to enter it. Okay. So I've received the STK again. So I'm just going to enter again. So I've entered the PIN to pay, and then you're going to come to our console and wait for the on complete event to be triggered. The initiator event is invalid. Okay, so that means that the API didn't handle my data properly. Let's redo it. So this happens when you trigger like a lot of a lot of STK pushes. So you should probably wait once one is not successful, like for a minute or so, and then do it again. Now this one should work properly. Yeah. So let's wait for the onComplete event and then see how it's going to be logged. Yeah, you can see that it's logged and the UI handles the WebKit handles everything in the UI. You can see that the response that we get a tracking ID on complete. The provider is M-Pesa, the amount that was paid, the net. Cellcom, I mean not Cellcom. IntaSend takes 30% of the transaction fee for the infrastructure. So you can see that there is all this information that is being handled. Now it's upon you to handle this particular state. And once you get this state, you can navigate now to submitting them, maybe to submitting the product that they bought to the database and so on and so on. Now I've tried other events like on fail and on in progress. They're not particularly being what do we call, they're not being the events are not being broadcasted, basically, for lack of a proper word. They're not being broadcasted, but on complete event is being triggered the right way. So I'm not going to be going through the other events, but the most important event in this particular section is the on complete one. Yeah. And now in the next section is when now I'm going to be handling, now working with a payment form where you control the amount, you control the phone number that is being entered, and other details that you want to control. Worth mentioning though in this particular section is that if you skip the data amount, if you don't enter this attribute, the user is the one going to get the option to enter the amount. I've tried it though for M-Pesa. For the M-Pesa WebKit, it's not working properly. So you should probably use this method when you want to entirely control the amount that is being sent from you're the one controlling the amount that is being sent or being deducted from the user. But when you want the user, for example, for donations, when you want the user to be the one to define the amount that they want to pay, you should probably go with the second option that you're going to cover in the next section. Now, once you've managed to handle that, we should go to the next section. The next section, you're going to be talking about how you can do it instead of like the web SDK handling your UI, knowing when the payment is successful, knowing the reason why the customer canceled the payment, and so on and so on. You might have a scenario where you want to handle all those events yourself, not handle them in the web UI. Yeah? So that option is the reason why we have uh, the, the server side SDK. So the first thing that you're going to do is that we are going to install the package. You can see from the documentation, the M-Pesa STK Push. You can see the first thing that you're going to need is the IntaSend node package. So we're first of all going to install it. So npm install IntaSend, not InstaSend node, which is the package that you're going to be using. And once you've installed it, you're first of all going to need to import it here. Import IntaSend from node, and then from there, can call it maybe IntaSend correction. So the first thing that you're going to need to do from their documentation is instantiate a class called IntaSend, and then from that IntaSend class you call the correction method. This correction method has all the methods within that SDK, and it's just a matter of calling the method within the correction. So that's the first thing that you're going to do. You're going to so let correction is going to be equals to the IntaSend going to call IntaSend correction method, and then from there what you now need to do is call the methods that are within the correction. So it's just now a matter of just tagging them. Yeah. So I've not instantiated the class first. So that is probably what we're going to do first. So new IntaSend, and then we first of all instantiate the class. So inside here you're going to pass the keys. So again, I'm not going to be showing my keys. So they're in the environment variable. So I'm going to use the .end package to pass my environment variable, which is what you want to do when you, I'm not sure how I named them. I'm just probably going to copy that from my environment variables, and I'm not going to show you. But you're probably going to want to let me guess how I named them. IntaSend, IntaSend, not live public key. I'm just guessing. I'm just going to interchange them. So now I've already added my keys. So the next thing that you want to do is to check, is to add the environment. I've already added my public and secret keys. The next thing that you want to do is add the environment. True is for test environment, but because I'm not in the test environment, I'm just going to add false. So this is going to create our class, which is now going to be called IntaSend, not IntaSend. And then from this class is where now we call the method. So method correction is going to be equals to now the class that we've created, and then call the method corrections. And then now from here is where now we can now access the classes, I mean the methods. The first thing that we're going to do before we go to that is from our route, Lipa na M-Pesa is where the form is going to be submitted. So once someone fills this form with, for example, 100 and then enter their phone number, that amount is going to be sent via the route for the form. And if you go to payment.ejs, which is what we are rendering via the direct route, via this particular direct route, so this page is basically the payment.ejs page. What we have here, payment.ejs page. So that is what is going to be sent via this route. The form is going to be submitted by this route, via the post method. It's going to be posted to this route, and it's that route that we are targeting here. So what is going to be posted here is going to be accessible via request.body. It's going to be accessible via request.body method. And for it to be accessible, you have to know what you're targeting. For example, you are targeting the input name amount and input name phone number. So that's what you want to target there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to let's use route let, and then inside there, because I want to be able to change them later, I'm going to add to the structure and phone number. Sorry, phone number. Hey. So I'm going to destructure the two there. Once I've destructured them, the next thing that I'm going to do, I want to ensure that anyone who submits a phone number, it's structured in the format of 254. Let me put this way. I want it to be structured in the format 254 and then 749442888, which is my phone number. And for me to do that, I'm going to use my normalize validator. So that's what I'm going to be using there. So I'm going to now, then I'm going to first of all process it by a normalized phone. And then that's where I'm going to pass the phone. So by the time phone leaves this function, it's been assigned to phone number, it's going to be in the format 254. And then the other thing that I want to do, the number that is being passed there, is it number or amount? I'm messing this up. This is supposed to be amount. So this is supposed to be amount. So the amount that we are going to receive there should first of all be validated. It's an actual number. You don't integers being processed to the front end, and that's being processed to the back end. And that's why I say the validated number, the validation should be in the front end. Yeah. So this is probably bad logic to be on the server. And that's why it should be in the back end. But that is part of the system or how you design your processes, and that's not part of this video. So once you have the phone number and the amount, we should probably log it faster. So let's log it so that we can see it. So I'm going to log amount and then phone number. Then I'm going to save that. So our script, our server is still running. So I'm going to come to here and then click on the new package. And you can see that we have our amount and our number formatted despite us just entering that way. So I should probably explain why you are seeing this page. From EJS, what we have, once we have this page for payment, which is covered in this particular section. And below it, we have a section for processing. The section for processing is called upon clicking on, for example, you can see once someone loads the method, the path name direct, you're getting the form and then you're getting the submit. And what you're doing is that you're also getting the process, the container processing. So once someone clicks on the event, or once someone clicks on the button, what we're doing is that we are displaying the container to block. You're turning it to block, and then after that, we are enqueuing submit. So that's basically why you are seeing this. By default, it's hidden once you click. Submit, that's when it's loaded. Yeah. Another thing you should probably do for your case, if you're going to take it to production, is ensuring that you cannot click on submit before someone enters actual data here. So you probably want to make this required and this one required. But that is now on your end, how you're supposed to handle that data. Yeah, so that's why you're probably seeing that processed. And then what we are doing later on, we are making sure that these sections are show failed. The failed section, once they are showed, they are redirected within 10 seconds. That's basically what is happening here. Nothing much. Yeah. So let's get back to our server. So once you are sure the phone number and the amount are being passed the right way, the next thing that you should do is come to the documentation and now call the M-Pesa STK method, and you're supposed to pass this amount. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy it. There's no harm in copying it. So and then I'm just going to come and add it there. And then what I'm just going to do is change the details. Now, here's the important part. If you are doing this in production, you probably want you passing the name of the customer so that once they process the amount, the receipt is going to be sent to them via email, the notification that you've paid this amount to a certain shop. But in this case, I'm just going to enter my name there. But if you're doing this in production, you probably want to have you're probably going to have these details to be customer details .agency. And then from here, you can just add the website name. And then here, you're supposed to replace with what we have here. So it can just be, you can just pass it as just amount. And then this one can be now the phone number. And then this one is going to be, you can just edit it to maybe YouTube tutorial. And that's it. Now, the then event. So once someone calls this method, they're supposed to submit these details. Once they submit that detail, they are going to get a response from the API. Yeah. And the SDK or the API is going to respond with this particular response. And it's upon you now to handle how you want the user to be, or the response to be handled. In this case, redirect user to URL to complete payment. This is probably wrong. Yeah, it's not the right comment. You should probably do with maybe just mention that maybe wait on payment completion. Or maybe all payment status, basically. Yeah, so what we are going to do here is we are going to get the response whether the payment was sent, whether it's in progress, whether it's scheduled, like the actual status of the payment. That's what we're going to get here. And then here is where we are going to get an error caught. If there's an error, it's going to be displayed here. So for the minute, we're just going to log it so that we can see how it's going to be handled, right? So let's do that right now. I'm going to come to our page, and then you've already entered the amount. Let's click on renew package. As it's processing on the front end, you're going to get this response, and this response says that our payment status is pending. I've received the STK push on my phone, and you can see that the net amount is the amount that we entered, which is 1,000, and the amount that we're going to receive should the payment be successful. Yeah. So this is the body that you're going to receive. Remember that this is not completion status. That's why it's on status pending. So you don't want to end it at this point. You want to ensure that the response that you get, you keep checking whether the payment was successful or not successful. And that is the best, the next endpoint or API that you're going to interact with in the next few minutes. So now the next step is on checking that or ensuring that the payment is complete or failed. We want to know the status. So to know the status of your payment, you can come to payment status. And from payment status, you can see that using the same correction, you can submit the invoice ID. And once you submit the invoice ID, you can, you're going to get the payment response. But here's the tricky part. How the payment status is going to be, this is not a webhook. So once you query, once you check the payment status too early, you're still going to get pending. Yeah. So what you want to do is set interval when you check query status, when you check payment status at certain points. For example, for the M-Pesa Daraja endpoint, they have a rate limiting, I think, of 15 seconds. So for this particular section, you can query it at 20 seconds, check the status, and then once you check the status, hope, because the payment usually stays within, I think, 100 seconds, or probably, 100 seconds also. Within 100 seconds, you want to query status within five or 4 times. And once you get the payment, you display it to the user, the status of the payment, whether it failed or it was processed the right way. So what you're going to do is, inside this particular section is where you want to submit the response or submit the ID to now the function that is going to handle the querying of the payment. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we are going to create another file inside here. Let me close this. So inside here, we are going to create a file called payment status.js. Then what you're going to do here is what you have here. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm just going to paste it there. And then what you're going to do here, I'm not going to tap into the InstaSend class again. I'm just going to assume that we're going to get it. So once you get the payment, and then I'm going to assume that we're going to also get the invoice ID. So I'm just going to pass the invoice ID here. And once I get the status, so once you get the status, it's upon you to decide now what you want. So from where I sit, what I want to know, for example, this is the response that you're going to get a similar response. So what I want to get to share first of all is on, for example, I want to share the status, which is now going to be response. So this one should probably have. So I want to share status dot. Oh no, this is supposed to be res. Res dot invoice ID, and then so I should probably just first of all create a constant called invoice, and then this one is going to be equal to resp, and then dot invoice. Once I get that, now I'm just going to be using here invoice dot invoice dot invoice ID. Our status is going to be invoice dot state, and then I'm going to have okay. The next thing that I want to pass is, let me start first of all here with the invoice. Invoice ID, so that we can know what you probably want to get. No, this one is going to be the inside hook on ndani. Then here we're going to get pass invoice dot what invoice ID. So let's structure this properly. Instead of, let's destructure this, because that's what we're going to be getting via the response. So let's destructure it into a few variables. For example, I'm just going to destructure it to, instead of doing dot invoice, let's structure the invoice ID there, the state, and then the what. What else do you want to know? The amount, and not the net amount, the value. It's because value is what we charge the client. Net amount is what we get in our wallet, in our IntaSend wallet. And then you probably want to know the account. What else do you want to know? You also want probably to know the failure reason. If you want to display it on the front end. So I'm going to add failure underscore reason, which is what we have here. I'm just destructuring what's already there. Yeah. All the other, I think we can keep them null because some of this information is for cards. I'm just going to keep it null. Yeah, customer ID, I don't think that's important for us. And probably you want the date. I'll create that. I think that's important. But you're now getting that from the invoice body. So you probably want create that underscore art. And once you get these destructured details, what you want to do is construct a response. I'm just going to call it query response. Then I'm just going to move all this to our query response. Sorry. Then I'm just going to, here I have a problem. That should be okay. And then now here, instead of, I'm just going to paste these ones now. Then instead of doing invoice.something, and just, and then I'm renaming them so that okay, it's going to be value. You don't have to rename them. You can just respond with minimal. For example, for account, I'm not going to rename it. Failure reason, I'm not going to rename it. And created that, I'm not going to rename it. So that is what you're going to get. And then once you get that, you're going to return now the query reason, query response. Yeah. And then for catching the error, you can do the same. And then, maybe you want to store such reasons in your, or maybe such errors in your database or in your logs, not necessarily the database, but I'm not going to be doing anything there. So this is our function. Now, not a function. Now you're going to create a function that we can export, and I'm going to make it asynchronous. Then I'm going to call it payment status. Payment status check. And then this particular function is now what is going to be expect a function. Yeah. Now, what is important is to know that this correction, we don't have it. So you're going to pass it and invoice ID. So you're going to pass invoice ID. I know this may not be ideal. This is not the right structure that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to construct a function from the top up. But I'm just doing things my own way. So this is the function for, once we pass ID to it, and the correction is the methods that it's going to play around with. And then we just tag to status. That's how it's supposed to work. So we are going to do that right now. And I think you can also just basically pass status without having to pass the entire correction. So once you construct that, now Here is the important part I want you to understand. What this is what we are going to query after every 20 seconds, like just like we agreed that we are going to query it every 20 seconds. So I want you to understand that this is the function that we're going to query every 20 seconds. So now you have to write the logic for querying. Yeah. And for us to write that logic, I'm going to come to our helpers. And this is the important part where I'm going to now write the function for checker. Yeah. So I'm just going to create a function. Let me now start the right way. Yeah? This is going to be a sync function timed timed checking, and then no, I don't have this. Yeah, time checking is now what we are going now to import to our server. So I'm just going to import. Yeah, it's going to be called time checking, and now time checking is what we are going to respond to send our response here. So I'm just going to pass inside our timed checking. I'm going to pass our correction. So for a start, but the first thing is supposed to be the invoice ID. Yeah. Awesome. So the invoice ID, you have to get it from this particular response. So before you actually pass it. So I'm going to define a constant called invoice ID. And then it's going to be, you're going to get it from response less dot invoice dot ID. So I'm just going to call dot invoice. Then I'm just going to assume this is the structure. And then it's that invoice ID that you're going to pass here. So that should be okay. So it's this invoice, and then you get the invoice ID, and that's the invoice ID that you get to contained. Yeah. And then yeah, for a start. So let's go to our timed. Now here is where you're now supposed to use a function called set interval. I don't know whether you have interacted with it, but it basically works this way. You pass a function, and then you set the amount of milliseconds it's supposed to be queried. So you can read the documentation here. This is going to print hello world every 1 second. Yeah. So that's the function that we're going to use. So I'm going to use so set interval, and then what we are going to pass here is a callback function, and then that callback function is supposed to be tested every um every remind me every what every 20 seconds. So that's what we're going to do right now. Now the important bit is knowing that the set interval function is going now to call our payment status function, what we have here. So we probably want to import that here. So you should even probably have it in its own file. I mean, yeah, in its own file, not in the helpers file. But that is a story for another day. So you're going to call import. No, I want it to check from here. I want it to auto-complete it for me. And then from there, now here you're going to create an async function, callback function, and then that's where we're going to have the function. But don't forget to add 20,000 milliseconds, which is basically 20 seconds. The first thing that is going to do here is going to have a response, constant response which is going to be this function. And then this function, we are going to pass what we passed here. So this, we're going to pass the invoice ID and the correction, and then that correction is going to be accepted here. And then what's accepted there going to be passed there, and that's what is going to end up being in the received here. And because this is we are going to await on it because it's an synchronous function. We're going to wait on it. So once we get the response is always going to be in this particular format here. This particular format we have here. So what we're going to do is once we get the response, we have to define like what do we actually want to do. We once we get the response. So I want to stop when the payment is complete, and also stop the counter once the payment is also complete, once the payment also failed. And if you go to documentation here, you can see that it returns an ID for the timer. So that's the ID we are going to give the interval ID. Not set interval ID. We're just going to call it interval underscore ID. No. Yeah. So that's what we're going to have here. So once we get that interval ID, I want us to stop the constant checking once the ID is once the status is failed or all success or complete. But if it's pending, it should keep checking the status. So if response is equals to what we have to get here is the status. So status is going to be equals to response that we have there, and then it's going to be response.status. Now what we have here dot status, and then if status is equals to complete, what we're going to do is clear interval. Now clear interval, where is clear interval? Yeah, clear interval. Clear interval method, what it basically does is clear the timer instead of it clears it. Yeah? Once you set the interval, it returns your interval ID, and then if you want to clear that ID, you just pass it to the clear interval. So I'm just going to do that. The first thing that you're going to do is call the clear interval method, and then pass to it interval e. Yeah, that is on complete, and then you're also going to return response to the server now, the server file, so that it can does with it what it wants. Else if so status can be complete or failed. Yeah, actually I don't even need to do else if. I can do all here. Yeah, all status is equals to fail. So those statuses is what you're going to get from this state. So it's either pending, complete, or failed. Yeah. So once we get their status, we respond, we clear the interval, we stop the timer thing, and then we go ahead and forward our response. So yeah. This is going to be a problem, but before I even show you that it's going to be a problem, let's first of all come to our server. Let me close this one. Let's first of all come to our server, and from here, let's do a const No, no problem naming them. So how do I name it this one? Let me give it time is equals to cost, or maybe status, or maybe payment response. I should probably even name this timed checking. What is timed checking? Should probably give it a better name. So I'm going to rename it to timed payment checking in the hope that it's a better naming. For you to write clean code, you have to be very good in naming these variables and constants. So I'm going to wait to log the response that we're going to get. So from our function, the payment response that I'm going to get is console log dot payment response. And then I'm just going to try it out. So basically to recoup, once you get the details, once you've sent the payment, you're going to receive a response. Once we get the response, we're going to get the invoice ID from it. And then to our payment timed function, this is supposed to be await. It's supposed to be awaited. And for it to be awaited, we have to add, to make this callback async. This one is supposed to going to be awaited. We are going to pass the invoice ID from our invoice, then the correction, so that we can know the status, the status of the payment. Once we pass this one is going to be passed to our helper. Our helper is basically a timer, set interval timer. All this basically does it checks the status, the payment status, every 20 seconds. So what does our payment status does? Our payment status gets the invoice ID and the correction. It does with the correction what it wants. You don't have to pass the correction here. You can basically import it, which is, I think, the cleaner way to do this. Yeah, it's actually the cleaner way to do that. You can just import the class and then, but you have to instantiate it again, which I don't want to do. So I'm just going to pass it that way. But you just know there's a cleaner way of doing that. You don't even have to pass the correction. You can just pass the status method. So once you do that, I'm going to receive that from this particular end, and then I'm just going to log it. So we're going to try it and then see how it's going to respond. You already have errors. Let's debug this. So payment.js, I'm seeing that cannot import module payment status. So that's a naming thing. So I'm just going to come to our helpers and check what I imported here and just change it to yes. And then let's see whether the error is gone. So I'm going to now. Good. I'm going to try it out, and then log the response. So we're just going to come to our form. Let's reload it. Then so this is going to be 1000, and then the phone number is going to be our phone number. So, new package. We're getting undefined. So our payment is returning undefined. Let me cross this one. Receive the STK for 1000. So why is it returning to us undefined? Cannot read properties on undefined. So there must be something that I missed. Response.status. So why is it returning to us undefined despite us getting a response, despite us having like a response from the payment status? So let's do some retro debugging. Before we return the response, let's console log the response here. query response. Yeah. So what you're going to do is that you're going to see whether let me light it so that we can query response. So why are we doing this? We want to know whether our status checker is working okay. And then if it's working okay, we are now going to come to our status and check our timed payment checking and check whether it's actually receiving that status from what we are doing. So I'm going to retry it again. Let's do it. I'm going to reload it. Then 1,000, and then the phone number. Then let's do that. So you're getting undefined. Let's wait 20 seconds and see whether our payment status is going to be called by the set interval function. So it seems no, that is our timer. It's giving us an error there. So why is it giving us an error? So the other option that we can do, instead of first of all waiting on the 10 seconds, what I want you to know is that the set interval is first of all going to return a promise. And you want to handle that promise before you do anything else. So we are going to navigate to promise in JavaScript. So that once we return a promise, what it helps us when we return a promise, it kind of makes it easier to know when something is complete or is not complete. You wait, sort of like you wait on it. So to do that, to create a new promise, what you do is you create a new instance of promise. You create a callback. You create a function within the promise, and then the promise is supposed to have two options: when the option is resolved or when it's rejected, and that's what you're going to do in that particular section. So the entire thing, what we have here, is going to be set within a promise so that we can know when it's complete and when it's not complete. And then this promise is what we're going to return. So I'm just going to add a new promise here. So new promise. Yeah, and then what's going to happen here is we are going to have our code there. Okay, let me structure it properly. So once we have our promise here, I'm just going to structure it. So the resolve is what we are going to have here. Instead of return, we're going to have resolve. So that is our resolve. In case there is an error, that's where now we are supposed to have try and catch. Yeah, so that on reject we have a little bit maybe better error handling, and then this new promise is what we are going to return. So return the new promise. Yeah. So we are going to maybe add try and catch here. Try and catch helps with error handling, and then reject is what you're going to log out there as the error. I'm just going to copy this entirely, and then it's what I'm going to have here. What did I do wrong? Oh, I've taken it outside the program. It's probably just going to take it. Then that should be okay. And then you can move this a little bit inside. And then what you're going to do is on reject. That's where you're supposed to just throw the error. Maybe you can just maybe console log the error so that you can see it on your end. So let's try it now. And yeah, so you're going to reload that route and then just add the amount, and then you can see that because we returned a promise, apart from the response log, it's waiting on our promise to sort of resolve whether it's a success or not a success. Let's wait for 20 seconds. I've already received the STK push. So you're still receiving, cannot read properties failed. So that means there's an error somewhere. Let me check. Response.status. Okay, let me recheck the entire thing. You can see that we are receiving the what? Okay, the first is so now it's filling up. So okay, let me check it. No, the issue that we are facing right now is the issue of we are tapping into status even probably before it's defined. For example, here the status is probably going to return going in the first instance it's going to return a promise. Yeah, once it returns a promise, you can't go ahead and tap into status. So what you want to do is to make this, what you should do is to make this conditional, or at all remove it from here. And one way that you can do that is doing if promise is defined, then you check status. But you're not going to, instead of doing that here, you can just remove it and move this entire section inside our if condition. And then I'm just going to remove that from there. And then now, instead of tapping into status as if it's already defined, because in the first instance, let's okay, wrongly written response. So instead of just like assuming its status already exists, because in the first instance we're going to receive a promise, you sort of, if response is, if you get a response, that's when you tap into status, and then you can just save that, and then you can come back here and reload, and then you're just going to make this 1,000, and then you're just going to send that. You can see that we received the response, status pending. Let's wait 20 seconds and then see whether you're going to get a log for status query. Okay. Let's see that. Yeah, you can see now we are getting the response with processing. That means it's not still yet resolved. Yeah. Another 20 seconds. Yeah, you can see that the payment failed. The failure reason I kind of feel that they give failure reason for cards. Yeah, if I'm not wrong, because here it's supposed to give us, for example, for the Raja API, it gives us the reason why the payment failed. So I'm just going to come here and now that I know for sure that it's now giving us a response and I've returned that new response. I'm just going to come to my server, and then what I'm going to do here now is check whether I'm going to get the response from the helper. Now I'm just going to cross this one. Let me come to the helper. So we are returning this. So and that is what we're going to get here after we clear. I'm just going to come here and console log console log what we got from the timed, which is what you're supposed to have here. So query, payment response. Payment response is what we're going to get from here. Yes. And then now I should render based on the response that I get from there. Now, one thing I've realized is that we've messed up our small car function. We've written very dirty code, and that's probably why. If you try it by now, you'll see that even after getting the status, you're still getting some query. So I'm just going to reorganize it so that we can try it again. Okay, so we get the interval ID. So this is a function that we already have there. So the try is supposed to be inside the what we have here. So I'm just going to remove that one there. Okay, and move it. I'm just going to remove it there and move it to here. Try and catch. So that it's supposed to catch the response that we get from here. And then, okay. Then you can just organize it that way. And then now here it's here where you're supposed to catch it. That's where you're supposed to catch it. Then then we close our timer there. And then from there we close our promise, and then eventually we close our function. I'm just going to save that and reload so that you can see whether you're going to get rid of the payment has already been sent. That's probably why. That's probably because the form is still loading. Let's see whether we are still going to get those queries. So we've gotten our first query response. Let's see. If we still get another query response, I'll have to debug it more. If we still get another query response with complete or failed, because that's where it's supposed to end. When we get complete and failed, for example, we've gotten failed. Let's see. If we get another one, I'll still have to do some more debugging. But now that one is going to be an issue of clear interval not working. We'll have to check why we are still getting more query responses, even when, yeah. So let me debug. After hours of debugging, after a few minutes of debugging, I realized that the reason why it's actually repeating query response, in spite of us receiving a status code or a status that is supposed to resolve according to our code here, the reason why it's not ending and constantly returning responses, it's because we are not returning anything from the payment status. So we should probably return the correction here. Yeah. So return this after the correction, evaluate. We already returned the query here, but that is going to return within the then. Now we need to return outside the then so that you can return the corrective response. And this now should work. So we are going to try it again. Don't worry, this does happen. If you've interacted with code for a while, you understand that these kind of things happens. So the payment has failed. Let's see what we are going to have from our payment status. You can see that now we are returning you're getting the query response, and then inside the helpers, you're getting a response from here, and then the payment response from our server. So we can now be sure that the responses are hitting the server or they are coming back. So you're getting a response from the payment, and then a response from the helper, and then eventually a response from here. Now, in this server, there isn't much you're going to do for it. All you're going to do is an if. So if our payment.response status, if we get status is equals to complete. Sorry. This is going to be a string. All we want to do is respond dot send. What is this that I'm typing? Rest.render and render, and what we're going to render is what we have here for success in our views. What we're going to render is our success. So success, we're going to render success. Else, because by the time it's here, we don't have so many options. We've cleaned that. By the time it's reaching here, failed. By the time it's reaching here, it's either success or failed. It's either complete or failed. So yeah, and that's it. So let's reload it. I've reloaded it and it's failed. I should probably restart it again. So I'm just going to go back and 1,000 or maybe 1,000. Then try it. From our logs, the payment has been sent. Let's see. The payment has failed. Let's see whether the UI is going to handle that after 20 seconds. Yeah, you can see that the payment has failed now. And we got a failure. So I'm going to try it again with So it's supposed to be to direct. So I'm just going to try it again with TEDMOB. And then I'm going to initiate the payment. Let me wait for the STK push. I'm hoping that it's clearing the, now we're getting an error. Probably because of too many requests. I believe so. Um, and then you should always ensure that you check whether it's clearing a set interval. Uh, that is probably going to be one issue that is going to maybe cause the most errors. So I'm just going to I cancelled it. So it's probably going to fail again. Cancelled by mistake. Let me reload. One thing that you can handle clearing better is by what do we call it? We call it idem 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 yeah, to make them idempotent. Idempotent. This ensures that each clear interval is always going to be cleared, and because a set interval can be a mess if you don't manage it properly. It's eventually going to bring your server down by constantly sending requests. So one of the way you can ensure that transactions are idempotent, all the IDs that you get for each payment, they're handled the right way. So instead of just handling the generic ID, you can handle, you can clear. Now I've paid. Let's see whether it's going to show the success page. So one of the things that you can do to ensure that payments are, or the interval IDs are always going to be cleared, you can record it vis-a-vis the payment ID that you get. And once you get the payment ID, you store them in some kind of an array. Yeah. And maybe after 60 seconds or after 1 minute or two, you eventually clear all of them, because basically you can see that the payment process has been successfully paid. So now you can submit the product to your database and so on. So I was explaining how you can handle better. Then you can see within 10 seconds it reloads. That is our client side JavaScript handling that. So from our helpers, one of the things that you can ensure that querying is not going, or set interval is not going to run forever, is that you can set this to the invoice ID that you receive here and store it in an array. And in that array, you ensure that the array that you get based on the when the ID was created, you clear them after 2 minutes so that it doesn't run forever. But I'm sure there is better hunting for that. Yeah. So that has been it for this particular video. I know it has ran to almost 20 minutes. I mean, 1 hour, 20 minutes. I didn't want it to be so long. I don't like creating long videos, but I love it when you kind of see the experience that I have when working with different on when working on different ideas, and I love it when I'm going to sort of like doing the live coding so that you can see the actual developer experience. So, but that has been it for this tutorial. If you want more payment integration tutorials, I'm going to be making more of them in the near future, or constantly now. Yeah, and see you in the next tutorial. This has been great. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask. And all these resources are going to be in the YouTube uh, video description. And I'm going to commit this repo into GitHub. And I'm also going to add that video in the same section. See you in the next video.